Welcome. Now we will know about Ivan Petrovich Pavlov's theory. This theory is known as classical conditioning, proposed by Dr. Ivan Pavlov, 1849 to 1936, a Russian physiologist, won the Nobel Prize for his discovery. The other name of classical conditioning or respondent conditioning, Pavlovian conditioning. According to him, learning that takes place when a conditioned stimulus is paired with an unconditional stimulus. It was called by the name of classical conditioning because it was the first to be reported in the psychological report. He was the first to perform experiments to study how stimuli and responses associated. He conducted a number of experiments to study the connection between stimulus and responses. Theory of classical conditioning considers learning as habit formation. Pavlov conducted number of experiments in day-to-day study how the stimulus and responses are associated by simple surgical operations. A flow of saliva from a dog's mouth was transferred to a glass tube at the side of food. By seeing the food, the dog salivated. Then immediately, before giving food to the dog, a bell was rung. This experiment was repeated for several days. After many days came the bell only, but did not give any food to the dog. Still, the dog secreted saliva in the same quality as before. In the year 1890, Pavlov was studying the aspect of digestive process by observing salivation in dogs. When he made the observation that dogs begin to salivate before the food arrives, for example, at the sight of the food tray or sound of the assistant footstep. These are the experiments. By seeing the food, unconditioned stimulus, and then neutral stimulus, no conditioned response. And then you can see the unconditioned responses by seeing the fork or hearing the bell, whatever. And lastly, conditioned stimulus made by seeing the food or by the bell or by the fork. And the same how the level of conditioned stimulus through smelling the food, the same level was secreted, saliva was secreted. Salivation at the sound of the bell is an acquired response, and this acquired response is called as conditioned response. The process of strengthening a conditioned response through reinforcement is called conditioning. Now we will see the basic elements of classical conditioning. Unconditioned stimulus, US. Something that automatically causes a response. This is natural stimulus. Unconditioned response, automatic response or reaction to a response. Now, conditioned stimulus. Stimulus to which a subject learns to respond through repeated pairing with an unconditioned stimulus. Conditioned response. Learned response to a conditioned stimulus. Extinguish behavior. Fading of learned behavior due to lack of reinforcement. Spontaneous recovery. Reappearance of extinguished behavior without any provocation. So in the process of conditioning, before conditioning is unconditioned stimulus is food, unconditioned response saliva. Neutral stimulus bell, at the time no salivation. During conditioning, conditioned stimulus is bell, unconditioned stimulus is food. For both, salivation is there. After conditioning, conditioned response, that is conditioned stimulation, bell, relates with salivation. So first picture shows the food, second picture shows the hearing of bell, and then third one during conditioning, food as well as bell, and at the fourth level if you see means after conditioning only bell being given but the same level of saliva is coming out from dog's mouth. So coming to principles of classical conditioning. Here, principle of reinforcement. According to Pavlov, it was only the reinforcement that lead to conditioning. In classical conditioning, food is stated as reinforcement. Principle of time interval. That is an optimal level between the presentation of the CS and US. Conditioning is lower if pairing follows each other too quickly or too far apart. Principle of spontaneous recovery. The reappearance of an extinguished behavior is called spontaneous recovery. Spontaneous recovery occurs when a response reappears without any restraining after having been extinguished. Principle of stimulus generalization. Here, a reaction to similar stimuli is called stimulus generalization. Conditioned responses are elicited not only by the conditioned stimulus but also by similar stimuli. Principle of stimulus discrimination. It occurs when the subject learns to respond only to certain stimulus but not to other stimuli. This is done by regular reinforcing stimulus and not reinforcing the other. The principle of higher order conditioning. When conditioning is done to a new stimulus on the basis of a previous continued stimulus, it is designed as higher order conditioning. Now, principle of primary and secondary reinforcement. It is used to denote the stimulus connected with the organism's basic psychological need system. For example, food. That is primary. In secondary, stimulus regularly associated with primary reinforce acquired the power of strengthening the behavior. Principle of inhibition. There are two types of inhibitions, external and internal. External inhibition. Once the dog was conditioned, but it was found not to give conditioned response in the presence of strangers. Internal inhibition. Physical health of the organism may block the response. Lastly, coming to educational implication. As a teacher, what you can make over with this theory? Now, the principle of classical conditioning can be used for developing good habits of children such as cleanliness and punctuality. It can be used for deconditioning or breaking of anxiety, fear and phobias. It can be used to develop positive attitude towards. The theory emphasizes the importance of reinforcement in learning. Thank you very much.